President Biden meeting with Chinese leader Xi Jinping, a look at what the leaders talked about and why some lawmakers are sounding alarms. Could U.S. China economic relations be improving? Treasury Secretary Yellen saying she hopes so, alongside the G-20 summit. A spy caught, an American civilian defense contractor receiving his sentence in California for providing Beijing with aviation-related intel. And 3 more charged in federal courts for sending details on U.S. submarines and missiles to China, plus importing Chinese parts that went into U.S. military devices. And Biden raising alarms about Chinese military activities in a Cambodian base. Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Ellie Hart, in for Tiffany Meyer. Before we turn to today's news, we'd like to introduce you the sponsor of today's episode.
Secure, the true solution for your digital privacy and security. Secure is a private and secure messaging and email solution hosted in Switzerland, using military-grade encryption and Swiss privacy laws, giving you true privacy. Secure is 100% private and does not collect or sell any of your personal data. Secure's Helix technology connects you securely to our Swiss servers without the need of a VPN, guaranteeing privacy and security for all your communications. Secure Messenger doesn't require your phone number or any personal data that hackers target. Chat by Invites allows you to chat privately and securely with anyone outside of your secure network without the need for others to download Secure. Secure Send offers you a private and secure way to email anyone outside of Secure. You won't find this level of privacy or security on any other email or instant messaging application. Visit secure.com. Regain and protect your privacy today.
President Biden and Chinese leader Xi Jinping meeting face-to-face for the first time as top leaders. The two discussed a series of issues with relations between the two countries at their worst in decades. The talks come as both countries grapple with issues like Taiwan and the war in Ukraine. NTD's Iris Tal has more.
On Monday, Biden and Xi met for nearly 3 hours to hash out some of the thorniest issues in their relationship. That includes Taiwan, China's human rights abuses, and an ongoing competition. Here's what Biden said about the two countries after the meeting.
We're going to compete vigorously, but I'm not looking for conflict. I absolutely believe there need not be a new Cold War.
And Biden notably said this about Taiwan.
And I do not think there's any imminent attempt on the part of China to invade Taiwan. And I made it clear that our policy on Taiwan has not changed at all.
While Biden said the U.S. is committed to promoting peace in the Taiwan Strait, the Chinese Communist Party's readout of the meeting said there could be no peace with an independent Taiwan. And here's China expert Gordon Chang on Biden's Taiwan remarks.
President Biden was firm on his points. The point that was the most important was that the United States would oppose any unilateral move on the part of either side to change the status quo.
But Chang also knows a caveat.
If the Chinese don't believe President Biden's warnings on Ukraine, then they very well may not believe his warnings on Taiwan.
Meanwhile, human rights is another point of friction. Here's what Biden said.
He was clear and I was clear. They will defend American interests and values, promote universal human rights.
The White House added that Biden raised concerns to Xi about China's human rights abuses in Xinjiang, Tibet, and Hong Kong. But the Chinese statement made zero mention of them. Despite such diverging talking points, Biden told Xi that the U.S. is willing to work with him on issues like climate and food security.
The United States stands ready to do just that, work with you if that's what you desire.
But some lawmakers are sounding the alarm. Senator Marsha Blackburn said in a tweet, quote, Xi Jinping is focused on global domination, not working with the Biden administration on climate change. And Senator Tom Cotton accused Biden of being weak, saying Biden failed to acknowledge China's Cold War against the U.S., adding that it would further endanger Taiwan and embolden Xi. Meanwhile, the two pledged to keep communication lines open, and the White House announced that Secretary of State Antony Blinken would travel to China to follow up on Monday's meeting. Reporting from the White House, Iris Tao, NTD News.
And on the topic of North Korea, Biden said Beijing has an obligation to dissuade North Korea from conducting nuclear tests. He added the U.S. would take defensive action should North Korea continue its weapons testing, though he didn't give details. On the sidelines of the G-20 summit on Monday, U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen says she hopes President Joe Biden's meeting with Chinese leader Xi Jinping will boost U.S. China economic engagement. Here's more on her remarks.
Yellen said the meeting aimed to stabilize the U.S. China relationship and provide certainty for U.S. businesses in the future. Yellen also will meet with People's Bank of China Governor Yi Gang on Monday. She plans to discuss some economic issues, including China's COVID-19 lockdown policies and its troubled property sector. Earlier this year, the cash-strapped Chinese property sector saw a wave of debt defaults. And with China's strict pandemic policies that have squeezed the country's output and global supply chains, Yellen has encouraged more effective vaccinations in China, noting that American mRNA vaccines are at the ready. The meeting comes as U.S.-China relations hit a new low. That's over Taiwan and the growing U.S. technology export restrictions. Yellen said the U.S. has been clear with China about an independent U.S. supply chain and national security concerns about sensitive U.S. technologies transferred to China. But Yellen added the U.S. isn't trying to push U.S. firms out of China, nor curtail a wide range of commercial activities between the two countries.
With global trade and economic relations largely reshaped by the pandemic, U.S. Treasury Secretary Yellen now wants India to be part of the Biden administration's friendshoring agenda. On Friday, Yellen promoted the new trade approach in India. It aims to protect supply chains from what she called risky countries like China. Unlike onshoring or bringing production back home, the Biden administration has been pursuing what is called friendshoring. It's the policy of investing and practicing trade with like-minded countries. That's after the administration warned earlier this year that the United States cannot make, mine, or manufacture everything itself. So with friendshoring, Yellen said the U.S. will boost trade ties with trusted trading partners like India, and that's to detach global supply chains from American adversaries like China. An American civilian defense contractor has been sentenced in California. He was accused of acting as a spy for China and providing Beijing with aviation-related intel from his employer, an American defense contractor. Here are the details.
67-year-old Shapur Moinian was sentenced on November 7th for lying on national security background forms by indicating he had not had close contact with foreign nationals. Moinian, a former U.S. Army helicopter pilot, worked for various cleared defense contractors, including employers in San Diego. The U.S. Attorney's Office says cleared indicates the contractor is allowed to work on projects involving classified information. Prosecutors allege that while Moinian was working on an aviation contract in San Diego, he was recruited to provide information on, quote, multiple types of aircraft. A prosecution sentencing memo states that the United States has no way of knowing what information was passed and how damaging it was to the United States. According to Nathan Fennes, Moinian's defense attorney, none of the information involved was classified. He says most of the information provided is available from open sources on the internet. While prosecutors accuse Moinian of being aware his contacts in China worked for the government, his attorney says that the Chinese employer never specifically stated they were. Moinian was sentenced to 20 months in a federal prison.
And 3 more people charged in federal court last week. They're accused of selling U.S. military secrets to China and bringing Chinese goods into the U.S. defense supply chain. The Justice Department said in a statement that Phil Pasco, Monica Pasco, and Scott Tubbs used their company Quadrant to conduct an illegal scheme. They allegedly sent dozens of drawings about U.S. aviation, submarines, and missiles to a Chinese company. They also imported rare earth magnets that were manufactured in China. These magnets were included in components sold to the Pentagon. Finally, these parts were used in advanced U.S. fighter jets, among other military devices. Rare earth magnets sold to the Pentagon must be manufactured in the United States or an approved country. China isn't an approved country. A friendly gesture to a neighboring country or a new foothold for the Chinese military near the South China Sea. Debate over a controversial military base is heating up. China says it's helping Cambodia upgrade a naval facility called the Ream Naval Base. Beijing calls the assistant part of normal aid, but without directly naming the U.S., a Chinese regime spokesperson said.
I hope that extraterritorial countries will view the normal interaction and cooperation between China and Cambodia correctly.
The China-Cambodian cooperation is raising concerns in Washington. Just 2 days ago, President Biden singled out the military base in talks with Cambodia. He urged the South Asian country to be transparent about Chinese military activities there. The comment follows reports that the base is building a facility exclusively for Chinese military use. Here's Cambodia's response to the concerns. Its defense minister said even though China funded the upgrade, it's for the benefit of Cambodia's national defense. Why is this military base getting attention from the world's top powers? It occupies a prime location. The base is close to one of the globe's most important shipping lanes, called the Strait of Malacca. It's the shortest sea route linking the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. Almost a quarter of global trade passes through the strait, and a quarter of all oil transported by sea also travels through it. China, Japan, and South Korea also rely on the strait for most of their oil. If Beijing can take control of the Cambodian base, it would gain a foothold near the strategically important South China Sea. The base would also serve as Beijing's second overseas military outpost, and that would bring Beijing one step closer towards its goal of creating a global network of military facilities. Beijing is considering a number of countries for such facilities, and Cambodia is on the list. That's according to a report from the Pentagon. Right now, China has the world's largest navy, but unlike the U.S., it doesn't have a global network of military bases to project power. That said, the regime has started working on it and has already set up its first overseas military base in Djibouti, Africa. Djibouti is located near the strategic entrance to the Red Sea. The U.S. and other Western countries also run military facilities there. Back to the Ream military base in Cambodia. A shift in its use shows a split in Cambodia's relations with the U.S. and how it has grown closer to Beijing. This site used to be where Cambodia conducted military drills with the U.S., but the South Asian country halted that cooperation in 2017. Months after doing drills with China, 2 years later, a Wall Street Journal report said China struck a secret agreement with Cambodia. Under it, the Chinese army could have exclusive use of parts of a Cambodian Navy base. In 2021, Cambodia demolished 2 U.S.-funded facilities on the Ream Naval Base. That's after turning down America's offer to pay for renovations. Beijing has become Cambodia's biggest trading partner, and just last week, China announced a large aid package for the country, totaling over $27 million. And while Biden says his conversation with Xi was open and candid, there's at least one issue they reportedly discussed that has long been fraught with tension and evasion: human rights. NTD Evening News host Stephania Cox sat down with Levi Browdy, executive director of the Information Center of Spiritual Movement Falun Gong, to discuss this issue. Browdy said talking publicly about human rights with China is much more effective than in private behind closed doors.
Levi Browdy, welcome to our show. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Now, human rights was only lightly touched upon during President Biden and Xi Jinping's meeting. The official White House readout only makes one mention of it, saying Biden raised concerns about PRC practices in Xinjiang, Tibet, and Hong Kong, and human rights more broadly. What do you make of this?
Well, it is a bit of a concern, not just with this meeting, but it's been a pattern over many years and many administrations to mention only human rights very generally and only in private behind closed doors. And unfortunately, that's something the CCP has leaned on Western governments for years to do. It's much more effective to be specific in public about mentioning human rights abuses. We've seen that work in the past. Most recently, the Department of State has issued sanctions against specific Chinese officials for specific human rights abuses against Falun Gong, and that has really caused a good change in parts of China in having Falun Gong people in some cases released or the treatment of them being less severe. So specific public statements are very important. Unfortunately, that didn't happen here. We would encourage the Biden administration and really governments around the world to really put a focus on that and try and do that at any chance they can.
That's all for today's China in Focus on YouTube. We're now sharing a shortened version of our program here after being demonetized for more than a year. Here's what to look out for in our second half. As the White House TV producer called out to Biden, asking if he would raise China's human rights abuses to Xi Jinping. A person from the Chinese side attacked her, pushing her toward the door. Levi Browdy, Executive Director for the Falun Gong Information Center, spoke to entity host Stephania Cox about the incident. The full episode is available on our partner platform at Bok TV. To sign up, click the link down below. Thanks for watching China in Focus. I'm Ellie Hart. See you tomorrow.